Hey, everybody. Timo here. This episode is part of the Gitcoin Climate Solutions series. Please head on over to gitcoin.basin.global, check out our grant for the round, and then click back to grants, and you will see all the awesome climate projects. There are 40 individual projects and 10 bundles. This Gitcoin Climate Round is funding $333,000 of matching funds to all these awesome climate projects. So please support them. And welcome to the episode.
Perfect divine timing for everything.
Cool. Welcome to the show. Just for reference, we are streaming on YouTube and LinkedIn as well, simultaneously. Sage, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having us. Ned Horning, my co-founder, was invited. He had a pre-existing commitment. So he works full-time with ReSci Network as well in ReGen Network development.
I'm going to drop your grant page here in the chat. And why don't you just give everyone a rundown of, I guess, one, maybe ReSci, right? Before we explain the network, maybe touch on DeSci and where this sprung from. I think that's an interesting story.
Yeah. Decentralized science is a term that's been around for probably a year or 18 months at this point and popularized within the Twitter sphere, within Web3. And essentially, decentralized science is looking to subvert the norms of academic research and to provide alternative pathways for highly iterative and collaborative science. So the premise is, okay, the publishing structure does not make sense. People don't have access to what they need. People don't have $15,000 to publish in Nature, even if they have the right social connections to talk to Nature or be recognized for a submission. And the way the collaboration happens is pretty sticky. Also, just the way the grant funding works is just meant to really be predicated on work, which in a lot of ways makes total sense. And in a lot of ways, if you're wanting to test something radical or a regenerative that's been stewarded by indigenous communities and not acknowledged by capitalistic systems, like that, those types of grants just fall through the cracks. And yes, grant mechanisms, traditional grant mechanisms are a real choke point. And decentralized science emerged, and people were largely using that as a tool to drive forward biological sciences. People have been studying longevity. So you can think about VitaDAO, Molecule as sort of fundamental examples of decentralized science in the Web3 space. And I think those groups set an amazing tone. What is beyond academic, or including academics, but going beyond the limited academic. And so when I think about, okay, decentralized science is a framework, it isn't currently one type of science or not another type of science. But what Ned Horning, my co-founder, and I noticed is that, wow, a lot of attention, media resources, written resources, blogs, like everything is so deep into biotech that DeSci may as well be called like decentralized biotech. Like what is happening? And it was just the early adopters happened to be in biotech and in longevity. And then that's where all the momentum was rolling. And our desire is really to create space for community and to create infrastructure that can help support decentralized science for ecosystem regeneration. And within that, we are double clicking on regenerative agriculture, but because it is the lens that both Ned and I are like comfortable with exploring and have backgrounds in. I have never owned a farm. I hope to one day have land very soon, be stewarding land, but I have studied permaculture. I studied advanced level plant physiology, was a biology major in college. I went down quite a few microbiology rabbit holes, including environmental microbiology and a lot of some of these hot terms now about environmental DNA. I was doing some of the first like eDNA metagenomic analysis experiments as a part of my senior thesis at Mona College. So yeah, terrestrial systems, soils, like those make a lot more sense to me. So I feel attracted to leaning into regenerative ag as a particular type of ecosystem regeneration that we can help support. And Ned, his background is that he used to work with NASA. He nerds out really hard on remote sensing. And one of his coolest experiments that he's running with ReGen Network development, which is like the science arm of ReGen, referred to as R&D for short, he's studying sheep silvopasture in vineyards in California. And so his job in that particular body of work right now is to help find ways of remotely verifying whether or not that silvopasture is happening. Are the sheep being taken out into grazing patterns? How to verify whether grazing is or isn't happening, those sorts of things. And yeah, so ReSci Network has, in its inception, it was like, wow, any and all type of ecosystem regeneration we just want to hold space for. And I think that's actually still true at the umbrella level, because what is a network? It's everything. It's connecting resources between people, connecting different sets of knowledge, like resources, all of it. And I think what's emerging right now is an autonomous research community under the ReSci Network umbrella that's dedicated to regenerative ag. And then under that will be specific ARCs, autonomous research communities for specific bioregions. I have open invitations to multiple people who are really deep into marine ecosystems and want to be talking about biodiversity in oceans, mangrove health, all of it. And I'm here for it. It's just not my background. And so the invitation I basically am extending, like anyone who feels like they have the drive and connection to a particular place where marine regeneration is happening, like you are more than welcome to come and host, start an arc within the ReSci Network umbrella. We encourage it. I'm simply trying to be very mindful of how much I can bite off at once in starting a new endeavor and wanting to be big in use case for trying something very new so that we have tangible outcomes and feedback around what we're trying to do, which is effectively hosting a database about what types of regenerative projects are going on, who is trying to develop a methodology for regeneration, regardless of what stage they're. So holding that project database, holding a database, and then using expertise tags and location tags to hopefully facilitate those folks finding each other, whether it's one-off consulting or they form a relationship for a methodology development sprint and later a peer review sprint, all of that. So I believe in full bloom, within the scope of this year, 2023, what I would love to see is a really healthy database with hundreds of scientists in it and projects that are actually working. I don't necessarily need or want it to be full of projects if the projects aren't updating their profiles or engaging in the community, but inviting whoever wants to be involved there and facilitate interesting conversations about types of regenerative practices. And then, as really the meat and potatoes of this, so to speak, facilitating sprints that would be 6 to 8 weeks long. And their essential goal is just to develop a methodology that is basically in this concept note stage. And I'm taking that phrase from ReGen Network and what they are doing for methodology development and review. So basically, ReGen spun up R&D, their science arm, with a long-term vision of eventually their science wing becoming its own autonomous, decentralized entity. And so where I see the play here is folks who perhaps might one day want their methodology to be recognized in some sort of holistic eco-credit and then available for in an eco-credit marketplace hosted by ReGen or other similar groups that might emerge. A project proponent would say, hey, we want to make a case for agroforestry in Colombia, for example, and we believe that this is important. These are the general sort of shapes of the questions and hypotheses we have about what actions and regeneration in this ecosystem. Take that concept, and if there's some level of coherence and a green light from ReGen Network being able to say, okay, this idea is relatively feasible. You've taken a first pass. That's great. Let's then line up a time slot for a methodology development sprint and find the right sis. And also, I think DMRB specialists, people who can look at the practical questions that scientists are developing and saying, okay, what hardware, what software would we need to do that? Where's that data going to go? How does that interplay with all these lofty dreams of integrating IPFS into all of this? And so I can pause there because I just said a lot and I want to pause for there.
I think if we go back to the very, very beginning, you said you noticed a gap or a trend in the biotech and the longevity. And you said, wait a minute, why isn't this movement happening for ecosystems and biodiversity and biology and even carbon? Yeah. And so I think that's super astute because it's a perfect use case for everything we're talking about here in ReFi and generation and natural capital and whatnot. And then also like the tagging system is super interesting about expertise, location. And for those who don't know, or maybe haven't heard about like the regen registry and methodology development, like these are open source methods for carbon projects or eco credits for ecological assets, ecological claims that happen in the real world. And so how do we like link like people's actions and the science and the claims and then the financial flows of value? So everything Sage is talking about here is like right at the core of like, how do we verify the ground truth? Which so
Right.
you're like, you have the hard job, you and Ned and ReGen Network. This is the hard stuff. Everyone else, that's easy.
Yeah, this is the really beautiful and messy parts because when I think about what should the role, or in my personal opinion, what should the role of Regen be if Regen is they're maintaining the Regen blockchain that the Regen marketplace runs on. They're really like holding space, economic facilitator. And I do believe that credits can have a real role in fueling circular economics if the right principles are in place for how the projects run, how much off the top is a marketplace taking, and then how much is going back to the continued support of the land and of the people stewarding the land and of the scientists doing the work to help verify the whole system. I think that capital is required to protect land in this day and age. Like regenerative practices take time, take energy. They're not necessarily like free. And oftentimes at the beginning, there might, especially for farms transitioning to regenerative practices, there could be a first or second year like dip in their income as a business while they're transitioning. So to look at the whole system, there's got to be, long continual capital influx. And I think credits can have a place there. And so I'm stoked that Regen exists and that the marketplace is live. And as I zoom out, it also feels apparent to me that Regen, if they're holding the marketplace, should not necessarily be the ones like calling all the shots on what methodologies are good or bad or like up to snuff scientifically, and having the spirit of decentralization at the core of it to be able to say, okay, this entity that's emerging, ReSci Network, sees itself more as a nonprofit research institution and a space holder. And so we're not going to like inherently profit off of the ratification of these methodologies into eco credits. We just want to make sure that like good science is happening. And I think there'll be a lot of nuance to tease out and how the financials work for that long term. But right now, our hypothesis is we're going to raise grants for this, like every other nonprofit. And as best we can, have financial independence from philanthropic donors. And we have an American entity, a Delaware LLC, and we're like very much looking at how do we have fiscal sponsorship with an entity that can help us raise large donations from individuals or corporations, et cetera, so that we have multiple donation pathways aside from just Gitcoin rounds. Because I think we're going to need, if we can accomplish what I think we can accomplish, we're going to need way more funding for the scientists. That's going to be the biggest chunk of this, is pulling scientists in, paying them well for their time, and making sure that the process feels good.
Is it true, Sage, that I don't know tons about the academic and the scientific research field, but from what I've heard or gathered is that a lot of big corporations basically support the academic institutions, and then science is basically it's open source or it's peer reviewed or what, but then it's used, it becomes profited in a corporation, whether it be any type of supply chain or chemicals or medicine or like these.
Yeah, you're spot on.
Yeah. So you're trying to alleviate or create another alternative that's not a biased or like kind of an extractive, like land grabby type system.
And I think something that might be hard for folks to see if they haven't done any like scientific literature searches, like if you weren't a science major and you didn't have to do this, it might at surface level seem, why wouldn't this report their data, and they report how they analyze the data? And if they show it some result is statistically significant, who are we to judge that? Like they know what they're doing, and they do know what they're doing. And also the way that the money is piped into universities from big pharma, from oil and gas, all of it. The way that you ask a research question directly affects how you can use statistical tools. You can form any questions. It's just about having wool basically pulled over your eyes. Yeah, you can create a statistically significant result that that proves anything. And how do we decouple motives of capital, motives of economic gain for gain's sake? How do we decouple that from the way the research questions are being asked? I think that's the heart of what I intend when I'm like using the word ethical science. To be fair, I think if any for-profit entity had to take control of science, ReGen Network is a great one to have. It's not that I distrust those people. It's that the system of saying, okay, this is a marketplace where eco credits are being sold, the underpinning methodologies then I think need to go through a different pipeline for the sake of everyone being able to have a deeper level of trust. And Web3 is all a balance of like trustless systems and trusted individuals. So how can this is a part where I'm like, whoa, things are really going to get crazy, but being able to create on-chain identities for the scientists that take part in this, what does that look like? There's so much to all of this.
No, and what's interesting is, like John just mentioned earlier on the first segment, was the ReFi passport or ReFi identity. Gitcoin has their passport they're working on. Jan is working on like a identity system. So it's like, how do you create trust, right, and legitimacy around the science and know who's being controlled, right? Like he said, like science or statistics can be skewed any which way in a nonprofit and be spun up to tell a story any which way, depending on which side of the equation you want, right? If you want oil and gas, you want ecosystem regeneration, or the cause or activism is, you can spin it either way. So it's like, how do you do it in a more trustless but trusted way, which is an oxymoron, but like transparent. I think there's some obviously big questions, right, we need to ask. There's going to be some growing pains, but like what you're doing is core to that answer.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's a really exciting time to be alive, isn't it?
It is. It's like up and down though, right? It's like big steps and then we go back some and then it's day in, day out.
But it isn't boring.
Not boring, that's for sure. So just for reference also, this is on LinkedIn, on YouTube. The point of doing this for me personally, at least, is to bring in the wider community, non-Web3, non-blockchain. I spend a lot of time in the air miners community, which is focused on carbon removal. A lot of scientists, a lot of engineers, a lot of business people, and they've been very skeptical of like crypto and blockchain and Web3. But the point of these segments we're doing is to, hey, look, there's actually tools and resources and real money, right, with Gitcoin Climate and Gitcoin Alpha going to these things. So what would you say to someone who's like in a peer of yours, like a scientist or who has an environmental science background or biology background or physics background, mechanical engineering? What would you say if they're crypto curious or climate, they want to get involved, but if they're not sure how?
All right. So for people who are this and are perhaps on the cusp of getting involved in decentralized science, but don't know where to start, this is a great question. Sorry, my leg's going to sleep. Just readjusting here. I, first of all, can understand that coming into Web3 may feel daunting because I think there's a lot of different ways that we communicate with each other. So I just want to speak to the sense of like potential form overwhelm or form anxiety. I would say find one little corner that interests you and start there, and don't feel like you need to engage in everything all at once. Don't force yourself to feel like you need to be active on Twitter and Telegram and Discord all at once. Just find a group of people that feel like it really resonates with your curiosity, trust your curiosity, and it'll all be okay. I know that at ReSci Network, my intention is to create a container for communications that feels better than what I experienced diving into the deep end of Web3 over a year ago, about a year and a half ago now. And we are exploring the use of a tool called Console, which essentially allows for hosting kernel sites in frame within a communications hub. Like our directory of scientists will technically live within our communications hub. It'll be there on a tab for direct referencing, and people will be able to easily Command F search for whoever's in the community. If they want to learn more about who they're talking to, the directory's right there. It's all they need. And then having a lot of space held for actual exploration of scientific topics. So
Sage, I haven't heard of that. What's the website or if I do a search?
Console YZ.
YZ, okay.
Yep. And my intention with Console for ReSci Network is to host people who are interested in becoming a part of ARCs, the autonomous research communities that are the people who are active participants and available for contribution to methodology processes, methodology development and review processes. So what I'm wanting to address is the fact that in the past there's been a lot of noise, overwhelm, hype, etc., in things like Discord servers. So I'm wanting to create a paradigm where people are excited to come into Communications Hub. They feel like the people who are there are active participants. So we're not necessarily going to have a lot of room for spectators in our console. Like, it's going to be about the people who are there to do the work, if that makes sense, to
Absolutely.
create a container of safety for people to actually connect on a deeper level. Because my sense of having comms in a Discord channel that's just got a lot going on in it, how much am I really going to open if I feel like I'm on like total broadcast to the world? And we're going to have some challenging conversations too around like, how do these arcs self-organize in terms of governance and voting, and how they actually come to group coherence on whether a methodology sort of passes or fails or goes on to the next stage. And I think it's about those groups having containers for working together, having space held for them, and then basically pushing updates to the public-facing Notion and saying, hey, if you want to be a spectator and support of ReSci Network, you're a donor, you want to know what we're doing, hell yes. Like this arc, they've got their methodology review process posted within the ReSci Network Notion, and they're going to make weekly updates there about the progress they're making. And I think people being able to comment on Notion or scheme up external banter around this on Twitter. Twitter's a great place for that, to say, hey, wider Web3 community, what do you think about what we're doing? But to, really give the scientists that show up a feeling of psychological safety, that the container is actually held and it actually means something. I think that's important.
Yeah, I resonate with everything you just said about, I remember it's been 20 months now or 18 months, but like getting involved in some of the Discords and Telegram and like Signal. I don't need another. And now I'm on all of them, using all of them. And I figure out how to you can figure out how to juggle it. Like you said, you turn some off and you check them when you feel like it. You're trying to treat it like I treat it like a coffee shop. If I'm not at the coffee shop, I don't care what's being said. But if I go in the coffee shop and I overhear something, cool, I'll join the conversation. But I think that for science people who are very used to like focusing, right, or doing deep work or deep knowledge work, like all this noise and chatter and Discord is like the worst, right? Like having another alternative. I love that.
Yep, we're exploring it. And my intention is to finish up this Gitcoin fundraising round and then go pretty deep on inviting people into the console, the scientists who have opted into our directory. And I see, this is my first time using Riverside. I see that it has a screen share option. Would I be able to use that?
Yeah. And just while you're doing that, go ahead. I was just curious if you've used Guild, if console is similar or something totally different.
Oh, I don't know what Guild is.
Guild connects, it's like token gated systems. Like you can connect, if you have a token in your wallet, you connect to your Discord or a Telegram or a Google Doc based on like different NFTs or tokens in your wallet.
Okay.
And so cool. Go ahead.
Sweet. I'll have to do a little bit of digging on that. And to start, ReSci Network is not a project with a token, and we don't have keys involved at this stage. We're really just looking to get people involved and to try decentralized peer review and to see if it can work, and then be in tandem thinking a lot about but almost like in the sense of not wanting to put the cart before the horse, curating a team to do the first methodology review, I think is important. So when you type in ReSci.network, it will redirect you to our Notion page. So this is where our information lives. So here under Web3 community, this will tell you more about our proposed budget for this quarter, how much we would like to raise in this Gitcoin round, everything we've done since the end of GR15, funds that have been used, funds that are been holding for particular uses, all of that. And then the directories are here, and you can see that there's an intake form right here at the top for people that want to put in their information. And so then people can list their areas of expertise, their particular biomes, their location, all of that stuff. And we're hoping to be able to match people, their expertise, with the methodology projects directory here. So Coffee Impact Collective, Adaptive Agroforestry, There's a few here, and we're really excited about this. Zarina is working with us and helping with some scientist outreach and onboarding for the ReSci Network team. And then she's got a methodology project herself around sustainable coffee and cacao. And her methodology ideas are influenced by this space methodology that Sev at Ecolabs is working on. And we're still working things out, but I think that a great starter methodology to try this development process with would be Sev's adaptive agroforestry project. So we're in the process of just nailing that out, seeing what that looks like as a first step. Yeah. Do you have any questions about any of that?
I think in my experience, BASIN, we've been working on our own methodology. It's a holistic methodology around the higher and better use of real estate rather than the highest and best use of real estate. Like, how can you look at a piece of property or a building or a degraded piece of land and incorporate all these different things like in a modular way? When I listen to Regen Network and the vision of like modular methodologies being able to be applied to a project, like the BASIN stack it's like kind of an incorporation of that of, okay, how do you take a polygon, a piece of property, and then minimize the value, not just the financial value, but like the environmental value, the biodiversity value, the natural capital value, the social value, all the ecosystem services. But what I've found is I think Regen Network, they have so much going on, and this is like almost like supplemental of like Dev or myself, we can turn to you and work with you and Ned, and then simultaneously do a concept note and get feedback from the Regen registry community. I feel like it's a really good just use case of like building on top of Regen in a way.
Yeah, the goal is to be in synergy with them and to help them because their R&D team is not very big and they're not at this time particularly first to handle all of this. And so wanting to make sure that concept notes are like in alignment with their ethos and also, take off a lot of the burden that's been resting on one or individuals that are the primary reviewers of the concept notes.
Cool. We really appreciate you coming on, sharing about your Gitcoin grant and also what the ReSci Network is doing. I'm a big supporter of your work and Ned's work. I love the idea of the stewardship methodology and the space methodology. I think there's just there that we didn't even talk about today, but I think I encourage people just to go check out the grant, get involved, donate, and then just follow Sage and Ned's work.
Yes, I appreciate your time today. Thanks for having me on. Any donations are greatly appreciated. We're hoping to raise 25K, which is what we raised in GR15. It'd be amazing if we could hit 25K again. And again, our proposed budget is published on our Notion. And most of the money is going to in this quarter. Support if you can. And I'll hop off and make space for endangered tokens.
Make sure to add it to your final ballot. Please make a donation to every single one. It doesn't matter how big or how small it is. It's more about the number of votes and the number of donations that counts, because that's what engages quadratic funding. This Gitcoin Climate Round is funding $333,000 of matching funds to all these awesome climate projects. So please support them.